Imagine this. You're in the grand council chamber of your life, surrounded by allies who swear eternal loyalty, only for a single act of betrayal to ignite a fury that consumes your judgment, topples your strategies, and leaves your empire in ruins. What if anger wasn't your undoing, but your greatest ally turned foe? What if, by mastering the shadows of human nature, as Niccolo Machiavelli did, you could extinguish rage before it sparks, viewing every slight not as personal affront, but as predictable maneuver in the game of power? Drawing from the timeless cunning of the Florentine master, we unveil the path to unassailable calm. Do this, and you will never be angry at anyone, because in the arena of existence, emotion is the chain that binds the weak. Break it, and you reign supreme. Stay with us as we dissect these Machiavellian secrets, forging an armor of indifference that no arrow of insult can pierce. Your serenity awaits. Seize it before resentment claims you. In the labyrinthine courts of fortune, where men don masks of virtue while harboring daggers of self-interest, Niccolo Machiavelli imparts a doctrine not merely for princes, but for all who seek dominion over their fates. Master your passions, or they shall master you. Anger, that volatile flame, arises from illusion, from expecting fidelity where none exists, from deeming actions personal when they are but echoes of universal frailty. Machiavelli, in his piercing gaze upon humanity, reveals men as ungrateful, fickle dissemblers, eager to evade peril and covet gain. Yet within this grim diagnosis lies liberation. To understand that betrayal and deceit are not aberrations, but constants, threads woven into the fabric of human nature. To never ignite in wrath, one must internalize this truth. Human deeds stem not from malice toward you alone, but from an innate drive for advantage. The merchant who cheats, the ally who falters, the lover who strays, all act from the same primal law of self-preservation. To be angered by this is to rage against gravity itself. Anticipate betrayal as you do the tide's retreat. Thus, when it comes, it stirs no storm within. Accepting human imperfection does not weaken the spirit, it fortifies it. When you cease demanding purity from the impure, you become untouchable. When the heart no longer takes offense, the mind begins to rule. This is no call to cynicism, but to prudence. The fox's wit that scents traps afar, and the lion's poise that waits for the precise moment to strike. To see clearly is not to hate, but to govern oneself with cold serenity. By adopting these practices, drawn from the master's wisdom, you transmute anger into strategy, passion into discernment. Every insult becomes instruction, every deception a lesson in vigilance. You begin to move as the invisible hand behind appearances, calm, patient, untethered by emotion. For Machiavelli's hidden teaching is this: power does not belong to those who conquer others, but to those who no longer need to be moved by them. When wrath turns to understanding and understanding to control, the soul ceases to burn and begins to command. Heed these principles, and rage becomes a relic of the naive, a forgotten ember extinguished by the cool, unshakable flame of wisdom. First, embrace the constancy of human ingratitude. Machiavelli warns, for it may be said of men in general that they are ungrateful, voluble, dissemblers, anxious to avoid danger, and covetous of gain. In this unflattering portrait, he captures a truth that every ruler and every awakened soul must confront. Gratitude is the rarest currency in the marketplace of human motives. When a benefactor turns foe, or a friend forgets your aid, anger surges from the illusion of exception, from believing that you, unlike others, would be met with loyalty equal to your generosity. Yet Machiavelli would remind you that such shock betrays ignorance, not betrayal. This is the natural order, the quiet law that governs men when fortune shifts. As he notes in The Prince, Alliances bound by comfort dissolve in the first tremor of peril, for men pledge devotion in safety but scatter when danger breathes near. To escape the chains of fury, you must alter the premise of your giving. Bestow favors not as seeds of friendship, but as instruments of influence. Each act of generosity should serve a purpose, political, social, or psychological. Once its use expires, release it without nostalgia. Expecting gratitude is like expecting the sea to remain calm. It contradicts its nature. Consider Cesare Borgia, Machiavelli's exemplar of pragmatic detachment. He rewarded loyalty lavishly when it advanced his aims, yet purged his allies the moment they became liabilities. His strength lay not in cruelty, but in clarity, the refusal to interpret necessity as betrayal. Machiavelli admired him because he ruled through understanding, not emotion. So when ingratitude appears, view it not as a wound, but as confirmation that the world obeys its ancient rhythm. Laugh inwardly at the repetition, for it reveals predictability, and predictability is power. Every act of faith broken, every promise undone, merely reaffirms your foresight. Redirect your energy from resentment to recalibration. Form new alliances, not out of affection, but alignment. Distribute trust like a strategist, not a saint. Let others burn in the fire of disappointment while you remain untouched, cold yet conscious. In time, what once inflamed your heart becomes a mere ripple in the current of your composure. You learn to give sparingly, receive warily, and measure men not by words, but by interests. Thus, the sting of unthankfulness fades, replaced by the cool calculus of dominion, the serene mastery of one who no longer expects virtue from the volatile, but uses volatility to his advantage. Second, cultivate detachment from expectations of virtue. Men are not angels, but beasts, creatures of appetite, fear, and ambition. The illusion that they act from goodness is the root of most fury. We rage not at evil itself, but at our disbelief that it could exist so near to us. Machiavelli urges a colder wisdom. Asterisk, he who builds on the people builds on mud. Asterisk, to him, man's nature is not tragic. It is simply asterisk, constant asterisk. He sins not from corruption, but from design. Anger ignites when ideals clash with reality, when we project purity onto others and curse them for being merely human. To extinguish this fire, one must first renounce the myth of inherent virtue. Presuppose, as Machiavelli counsels, that all men are bad, and that they reveal their malignity when it is safe to do so. Such a belief does not poison the heart, it inoculates it. For when deceit arises, it no longer feels like treachery, but confirmation of the natural order. In asterisk, the discourses asterisk, Machiavelli warns that without restraint, chaos blooms. Desires, left unchecked, devour harmony. Thus, expect deception as you do dawn's light, inevitable, predictable, cleansing in its consistency. When a colleague undermines your progress or a lover drifts into another's arms, do not interpret it as betrayal of your trust, but as fulfillment of their self-interest. They act not asterisk against asterisk you, but asterisk for asterisk themselves. The difference is liberation. Emulate the prince who, fearing not hatred but contempt, keeps his composure by appearing steadfast and grave. His authority flows not from affection, but from command of perception. Such composure requires practice. Record your disappointments, trace them to the expectations that birthed them, and watch the same pattern repeat until recognition replaces pain. The ledger of human conduct becomes your scripture, written not in emotion, but in observation. History confirms the lesson. Rome's senators, paragons of civic virtue in peace, turned wolves in crisis, plotting, flattering, conspiring to preserve their own skins. The wise learn to work with vice, not against it. For the cunning man, corruption is not an obstacle but a current to be navigated. By expecting vice, you preempt rage. You learn to respond not with wounded pride, but with silent calculation, severing ties when necessary, exploiting weaknesses when useful. Detachment in this sense is not indifference but command, the ability to watch the storm without being swept away. And so anger dissolves. What once provoked indignation now evokes insight. Virtue becomes not a demand, but a variable in your design. You cease to hope for goodness and begin to maneuver through imperfection with grace. For the man who no longer expects angels cannot be wounded by beasts. Third, practice the art of *** simulation and dissimulation, *** without emotional investment. Machiavelli, ever the anatomist of power, declares, *** a prince ought to be a great feigner and dissembler, *** for he knew that survival, whether in court or in love, depends less on sincerity than on performance. Those who bear their emotions become prey to those who conceal theirs. Anger, in particular, is the luxury of the transparent. It exposes the wound, reveals the weakness, and invites manipulation. To master oneself, therefore, one must learn to wear masks with intention. Every interaction is theater, and the wise man understands his role. When provoked, simulate calm. When insulted, respond with poise. Let your silence unnerve more than your words could wound. Internally, however, become the quiet observer, dissecting motives, tracing patterns, measuring opportunities. Machiavelli's genius lay in this duality, to appear merciful, humane, and open, while inwardly calculating as a chess player who never moves without foresight. In the affairs of state or of the heart, the same law governs. Show what disarms, conceal what empowers. Feign indifference to offense. Deny your adversary the satisfaction of seeing your composure crack. He who cannot read your heart fears it. This psychological opacity is the highest form of defense, for what cannot be anticipated cannot be controlled. Remember how Machiavelli praised Cesare Borgia, whose serene demeanor masked ruthless intent. When betrayal surfaced, he did not erupt in fury. He smiled, withdrew, and struck later with precision. The lesson endures. True control is not suppression but transformation. The alchemy of rage into reason, of instinct into intelligence. Cultivate this art deliberately. Each time anger tempts expression, pause and inhabit your role. The stage is yours. The audience irrelevant. You act not to deceive others, but to discipline yourself, to train your emotions to serve, not sabotage, your intent. Over time, the mask becomes your mirror, a reflection not of deceit, but of mastery. Unchecked emotion betrays weakness. Controlled emotion becomes weapon and shield alike. By dissimulating rage, you do not bury it, you refine it. You transform fury into focus, reaction into awareness, while others unravel in the spectacle of their own volatility. You remain the silent director of the scene, and in that silence lies serenity, for the actor who commands his stage fears no audience. Fourth, recognize ambition's universality and cease personalizing rivalry. Machiavelli observes, ambition is so potent in breasts that it persists regardless of rank, breeding enmity and war. Anger ignites when we see competition as attack, yet it's innate. Desire exceeds attainment, yielding discontent. To never anger, view rivals as mirrors of your own drives, not villains. In The Prince, he cautions against believing benefits erase old injuries. When outmaneuvered, attribute it to ambition's tide, not malice. Cultivate this by studying histories. Alexander's generals fractured his empire post. Death, driven by greed. In daily life, when a peer advances at your expense, nod to the game. Redirect ambition elsewhere. This perspective quells rage, fostering admiration for cunning. Anger vanishes when rivalry is depersonalized, seen as fortune's dance. You emerge wiser, channeling energy into your ascent. Fifth, instill fear over love to preempt emotional vulnerabilities. Machiavelli decrees, better feared than loved, for love yields to self-interest, fear to punishment's dread. Anger arises from love's betrayal, fearing you, others hesitate to provoke. To avoid wrath, cultivate a reputation for resoluteness. Irrevocable judgments deter slights. Not cruelty, but firmness. Respond to offenses with measured reprisal, sans emotion. Borgia's executions maintained order without personal vendetta. In relationships, set boundaries evoking respect's fear. Violations meet calm severance. This preempts anger by reducing incidents. Few cross the feared. Internally remind, men's fickleness makes love frail. By prioritizing fear, you shield the heart, viewing interactions transactionally. Rage recedes, replaced by command's cool poise. Sixth, anticipate changes in fortune and men's allegiances, nullifying surprises fuel for anger. Machiavelli teaches, fortunes fluctuate from desires clashing with possessions. Rage erupts from unforeseen shifts, foresee them, and calm prevails. In discourses, he notes identical passions persist across eras. Train by scenario, planning, envision betrayals, prepare responses. When they occur, it's affirmation, not shock. Historical precedent, Florentine republics fell to internal ambitions. In commerce or kinship, expect volt. Faces, diversify ties. This foresight dissolves anger's root, disappointment. You adapt, turning adversity to advantage, as the prudent prince does. Seventh, eschew dependency on others' fidelity, fostering self-reliance that starves anger of sustenance. Machiavelli warns, reliance on words, sans preparation, ruins princes. Anger festers in broken trusts. Build independence, and it withers. Cultivate skills, networks, reserves. Be the lion and fox. When others falter, your foundations hold, eliciting no fury. Exemplar, Machiavelli's own exile taught self-sufficiency amid political whims. In personal spheres, invest in solitude's strength. Dependencies invite ingratitude's bite. Self-reliance reframes slights as irrelevant, preserving equanimity. Eighth, discern the futility of vengeance, opting for strategic withdrawal over emotional reprisal. Machiavelli advises, injure so none retaliate or caress. Anger drives vengeance, breeding cycles. Recognize its waste. Instead, assess. If harm minor, ignore. If grave, crush decisively sans rage. In The Prince, he praises princes who act coldly. When offended, pause. Vengeance often empowers the offender. Withdraw, denying engagement. Anger dissipates in inaction's void. History, Rome's grudges prolonged wars unnecessarily. This discipline transforms potential fury into calculated disengagement. Ninth, internalize that men's actions reflect their fears and greeds, not your worth. Machiavelli states, men offend the loved more readily than feared. Anger personalizes, depersonalize by attributing to base motives. When slighted, query, what fear or gain drives this? Understanding quells rage. It's not you, but nature. Practice empathy's detachment. View as observer. Machiavelli's cynicism, all weary in good, afflict in evil. This lens fosters pity over anger, empowering responses. 10th, harness silence as shield against provocation's barbs. Machiavelli's wisdom, gravity in actions averts contempt. Anger thrives on reaction, silence starves it. When insulted, respond not, deny fuel. In courts, unspoken retorts preserve dignity. Modern echo, ignore trolls, they fade. Silence signals control, internally diffusing rage through breath or reflection. Over time, it becomes habit, rendering you impervious. 11th, reflect daily on human constancy's myth, reinforcing mental barriers to anger. Machiavelli, same desires eternally. Journal betrayals as examples, not grievances. This ritual desensitizes, turning potential fury to study. Like the prince guarding against fickleness, you fortify the psyche. 12th, prioritize ends over emotional means, viewing people as instruments. Machiavelli, necessity justifies. Anger distracts from goals. Refocus on objectives. When thwarted, ask, how advances my aim? Detach from interpersonal drama. 13th, avoid attachments that breed vulnerability to rage. Machiavelli, love's chain breaks easily. Limit deep bonds. Transactional ties reduce emotional stakes. 14th, study adversaries' tempers to manipulate, inverting anger's direction. Machiavelli, irritate the temperamental. Turn their rage against them, remaining calm. 15th, accept fortune's caprice, blaming not men but cycles. Machiavelli, fortunes change from discontent. Anger at individuals ignores larger forces. 16th, feign virtues while harboring none emotionally. Simulate mercy, but act as needed sans guilt or anger. 17th, build resilience through adversity's lessons. Machiavelli, time reveals malignity. Each slight strengthens, reducing future rage. 18th, view life as war, where anger is desertion. Maintain discipline. 19th, seek solitude for reflection, away from provocateurs. 20th, ultimately, embody the prince. Prudent, adapting, turning all to advantage without emotion's fog. In summation, Machiavelli's edifice of wisdom erects a fortress against anger. Understand humanity's flaws, detach, strategize. These precepts, woven into habit, render you unassailable. Emerge not enraged, but empowered. For as the master avers, the prudent adapts, mastering fortune. Share if transformed. Subscribe for more. Stay composed.